The Galactic Council chamber stretched before Ambassador Elena Rodriguez like a vast amphitheater of otherworldly architecture. Crystalline spires jutted from the walls, pulsing with bioluminescent energy that served as both lighting and a complex communication network for the more exotic species present. The air itself hummed with translation matrices, converting the clicks, whistles, electromagnetic pulses, and subsonic rumbles of a dozen different species into comprehensible speech. Elena stood at the center of the circular platform, her polished diplomatic uniform a stark contrast to the flowing robes, chitinous carapaces, and energy fields that adorned the alien delegates surrounding her. Behind her, a holographic display showed Earth in all its blue-green glory, rotating slowly as she prepared to make humanity's case for membership in the most exclusive club in the galaxy. This was humanity's moment, the culmination of 50 years of careful negotiation since first contact. Every word mattered. Every gesture was scrutinized by beings whose civilizations had mastered faster-than-light travel before her ancestors had discovered agriculture. Ambassador Rodriguez, the melodious voice of the Council's AI moderator, filled the chamber. "You may proceed with your species' cultural presentation." Elena activated her personal display, showing images of human cities, art, music, and technology. But when the slideshow reached a particular section, she noticed an immediate shift in the chamber's atmosphere. "So," clicked Delegate Crixtal, the insectoid Zephyrian representative whose mandibles gleamed like polished obsidian under the artificial light, "these creatures live in your dwellings, consume your resources, and provide no quantifiable benefit to your species' advancement." The image showed a typical human family: parents, children, and a golden retriever playing in a backyard. Elena had included it to demonstrate human social bonds, but she could see it had sparked something entirely different than intended. "That's correct, Delegate Crixtal. We call them pets, and they're family to us," Elena replied, maintaining her diplomatic smile despite the growing tension she sensed in the room. The reaction was immediate and overwhelming. A wave of what could only be described as cosmic laughter rippled through the chamber. The crystalline Vorthan representative's faceted body actually rang like wind chimes, its harmonic frequencies creating an almost musical backdrop to the derision. The gas-form nebuloids shifted through colors that Elena's neural translator indicated as profound amusement and intellectual superiority. High Counselor Thorn, the amphibian leader whose aquatic species had conquered 3 star systems through calculated precision, leaned forward in his biomechanical throne. His gill slits fluttered in what Elena had learned was equivalent to incredulous laughter. "Family?" he wheezed, his voice carrying the weight of millennia of evolutionary advancement. "You voluntarily waste precious resources, calories, shelter space, medical care, on non-productive biological entities and call them family?" Elena watched as her carefully prepared presentation was overshadowed by what the aliens clearly saw as humanity's greatest weakness. She had anticipated questions about human warfare, about their relatively primitive technology, even about their short lifespans. She hadn't expected their relationships with animals to become the primary focus. Delegate Rodriguez interjected Unit 447, a robotic representative whose species had uploaded their consciousness eons ago. "Our analysis indicates these pets contribute nothing to technological research, military defense, or economic production. Yet humans expend approximately 261 billion credits annually on their care. Please explain this inefficiency." The mechanical being's optical sensors focused on Elena with uncomfortable intensity. Around the chamber, other delegates leaned forward, genuinely curious about what they perceived as an evolutionary dead end. "Humans," announced Delegate Crixtal to the broader assembly, her translation matrix adding emphasis that made the words echo, "may be the most illogically sentimental species we've encountered in the Outer Rim territories. They voluntarily care for creatures that contribute nothing to their advancement, technological, military, or economic." Elena felt her diplomatic composure straining. She had spent months preparing for questions about human aggression, about their chaotic political systems, about their tendency toward self-destruction. Instead, She found herself defending something so fundamental to human nature that she had never questioned it. With respect, honorable delegates, Elena began, her voice steady despite the growing chorus of alien amusement. You might be surprised at what our illogical bonds can accomplish. These relationships have shaped our evolution, our psychology, and our society in ways that pure logic cannot quantify. Sentiment over science, chimed the ethereal voice of Counselor Zenthara, whose energy-based species had transcended physical form. How quaint, how primitive. The laughter grew louder, more confident. Elena could see her species' application for council membership slipping away, not because of humanity's flaws, but because of what they saw as humanity's greatest strength. Perhaps, suggested High Counselor Thorne with what Elena was beginning to recognize as condescending patience. Humanity requires more evolutionary time before joining advanced galactic society. These emotional attachments to inferior species suggest a concerning lack of logical development. Elena straightened her shoulders, drawing on every lesson in diplomatic protocol she had ever learned. The fate of humanity's place in the galaxy might well depend on the next words she spoke. The Council's xenobiological research chamber was a marvel of advanced science, its walls lined with sensors capable of detecting and analyzing everything from quantum fluctuations to emotional brainwave patterns. Dr. Michael Harrison, humanity's chief xenobiologist and Elena's most trusted scientific advisor, stood amid equipment that made Earth's most sophisticated laboratories look like Stone Age tools. Around him, several of the galaxy's most brilliant scientific minds had gathered, not to learn from humanity, but to document what they considered the species' most glaring evolutionary flaw. The irony wasn't lost on Michael as he watched beings whose civilizations had unlocked the secrets of faster-than-light travel and consciousness transfer puzzle over something as simple as the bond between a human and his dog. Fascinating, murmured scientist Veltar, his tall, gray-skinned form hunched over a bioscanner as he examined Rex, Michael's German shepherd. The Etherian scientist's large, black eyes reflected centuries of clinical detachment. His species had evolved beyond emotional responses during the reign of Earth's dinosaurs, viewing feelings as evolutionary deadweight. The human neural activity spikes dramatically when in proximity to this canine specimen. Rex sat patiently as various alien instruments hummed around him, his brown eyes alert but trusting. The dog had somehow become the unofficial mascot of the human delegation, charming even the most skeptical species with his friendly demeanor. Well, most species anyway. Yes, Michael replied, scratching behind Rex's ears in a gesture that immediately triggered a cascade of readings on Veltar's instruments. The bond releases oxytocin, reduces cortisol levels, and actually strengthens our immune systems. It's a symbiotic relationship that's been refined over thousands of years. Rex's tail began wagging at the familiar touch, and every sensor in the room focused on the simple movement. To the aliens, it was data. To Michael, it was just Rex being Rex. Observe, Veltar announced to his colleagues, his voice carrying the excitement of a researcher discovering a new anomaly. The human's blood pressure decreases, stress hormones reduce by 37%, and, most curious, his cognitive function actually improves in the presence of this creature. A biochemical dependency, observed Unit 447, the robotic delegate whose cylindrical form was bristling with recording devices. Red optical sensors swept over both Michael and Rex as the AI calculated thousands of variables per second. The human organism has developed a reliance on external stimuli for optimal function. How remarkably primitive. Or remarkably advanced, Michael countered, but his words were lost as Dr. Yith Moore, a tentacled cephalopoid researcher, extended several appendages toward Rex. The dog tensed momentarily, then relaxed as Michael's calm presence reassured him. The creature responds to the human's emotional state, Dr. Yithmore noted, her skin shifting through colors that indicated scientific fascination. It's reading micro-expressions, pheromone levels, even electromagnetic patterns from the human's nervous system. And this one, scientist Veltar gestured toward Captain Lisa Zhang's cat, Whiskers, who was currently demonstrating typical feline behavior by completely ignoring everyone in the room while somehow managing to convey supreme disdain for the proceedings. Michael chuckled, a sound that caused several instruments to spike. Cats were originally domesticated to control pest populations in human agricultural settlements. But over time, they became companions. Whiskers there actually helped Lisa through a severe depressive episode last year when her parents died in a transport accident. The aliens exchanged glances, or the equivalent in their various anatomies. Unit 447's optical array word as it processed this information. Mental instability requiring non-sentient intervention, the AI recorded in its monotone voice. Another mark against human psychological evolution. The species appears unable to maintain emotional equilibrium without external biological crutches. That's not, Michael began, but was interrupted by Dr. Kexnell, an insectoid whose compound eyes could perceive electromagnetic spectrums beyond human comprehension. The feline exhibits no productive behavior, Dr. Kexnell chittered. Mandibles clicking in what Michael had learned indicated scientific puzzlement. It contributes nothing to the human survival, provides no tactical advantage, produces no resources. Yet the human expends energy maintaining it. By what logic? Michael looked down at Whiskers, who had finally deigned to acknowledge the alien attention by fixing them with a stare that somehow managed to be both bored and judgmental. Sometimes, he said quietly, the most important things can't be quantified. The aliens continued their observations, missing the subtle interplay happening around them. They noted Rex's protective positioning near Michael, recorded Whiskers' monitoring of potential threats, documented the microcommunications between human and animal that spoke of deep understanding. But they interpreted it all as weakness. Rex suddenly tensed, his ears perking up toward the chamber's main entrance. A low growl emanated from his throat, barely audible but unmistakable. The sound was different from his usual vocalizations. Deeper, more primal. Michael frowned. Rex was typically friendly with everyone, alien or human. Curious, Veltar noted, his instruments detecting the shift in Rex's biopatterns. Elevated stress indicators in the canine. Perhaps it's finally overwhelmed by our superior presence. But Michael was watching Rex's body language with trained eyes, and something felt very wrong. The dog's hackles were raised, his stance protective as he moved between the aliens and Michael. His nose was working, testing the air for something that had alarmed him. Whiskers had stopped grooming and was now sitting alert, green eyes fixed on the same entrance that had captured Rex's attention. Outside the research chamber, security alarms began to wail. The attack came like a thunderclap in a clear sky, shattering the peaceful monotony of diplomatic routine. The Zorth Syndicate, a rogue faction of militaristic reptilians who viewed the Council's peaceful expansion as weakness, had been planning this assault for months. Their infiltration of the Nexus Station had been methodical, patient, and utterly invisible to the Council's most sophisticated detection systems. Their cloaking technology was a quantum marvel, bending light and electromagnetic signatures around their armored forms while simultaneously masking their biosignatures from the station's sensors. To every scanner, alarm, and detection grid on the massive diplomatic complex, the Zorth simply didn't exist. But they had made one critical miscalculation. They had only planned for technology. Ambassador Rodriguez sat in her private quarters, 3 levels above the main diplomatic suites, reviewing tomorrow's presentation protocols on a holographic display. The soft hum of the station's life support systems provided a gentle background to her work, punctuated only by the occasional rustle as Scout, her border collie, shifted position on his favorite cushion near the viewport. Scout was a remarkable specimen of his breed, lean, intelligent, with the distinctive black and white markings that made border collies one of Earth's most recognizable dog breeds. Elena had rescued him from a shelter 7 years ago, and he had been her constant companion through every diplomatic assignment since. His calm demeanor and intuitive understanding of human emotions had made him an unofficial therapy animal for homesick human personnel throughout the galaxy. But tonight, Scout was anything but calm. The dog's behavior had been increasingly agitated for the past 20 minutes. He paced the length of Elena's quarters, his claws clicking against the metal flooring in an irregular rhythm that spoke of deep anxiety. His ears swiveled constantly, tracking sounds that Elena's human hearing couldn't detect. Most telling of all, he had positioned himself between Elena and the door, a protective stance she had only seen him adopt twice before, both times when Elena had been in genuine danger. "What is it, boy?" Elena asked, looking up from her work as Scout began a low, persistent whining. His brown eyes were fixed on the door with an intensity that sent a chill down her spine. Scout suddenly erupted into frantic barking. Not his usual attention-seeking vocalizations, but sharp, urgent alarm calls that echoed off the metal walls. The sound was so unexpected and violent that Elena nearly dropped her datapad. In 7 years, she had never heard Scout make that particular sound. The dog was already moving, pawing desperately at the emergency beacon on Elena's desk with enough force to activate the device. The small red light began blinking, sending a priority alert to station security that would normally have brought immediate response. But tonight, station security was dealing with problems of their own. The door to Elena's quarters didn't just open, it disintegrated. The reinforced titanium alloy barrier, designed to withstand everything from explosive decompression to direct plasma weapon strikes, simply ceased to exist as Zorth demolition charges reduced it to superheated vapor. 3 Zorth soldiers materialized from the smoke like nightmares given form. Each stood nearly 8 feet tall, their scaled hides a mottled green-black that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Combat armor covered their torsos and limbs, not the sleek, elegant designs favored by council species, but brutal, functional plating designed for one purpose: killing efficiently. Their heads were distinctly reptilian, with elongated snouts filled with razor-sharp teeth and eyes that glowed with a predatory intelligence. But these weren't primitive lizards. The Zorth were an ancient species whose military technology rivaled the best the Council had to offer. Their plasma weapons hummed with barely contained energy as they trained the weapons on Elena. "Ambassador Elena Rodriguez," hissed the lead Zorth, his voice a sibilant whisper that spoke perfect standard through a translation matrix. "By order of the Zorth Syndicate, you are sentenced to death for the crime of weakening the galaxy with your species' pathetic sentimentality." The soldiers moved with practiced precision, their weapons charging with lethal intent. Elena's diplomatic training had prepared her for many scenarios, but facing armed assassins in her own quarters while wearing pajamas wasn't one of them. But before the lead Zorth could complete his dramatic execution speech, 45 pounds of determined border collie launched itself through the air with a speed and ferocity that caught everyone, including Elena, completely off guard. Scout's leap was perfect, a testament to thousands of years of selective breeding that had created a creature capable of controlling livestock many times his size. He struck the lead Zorth center mass, his momentum carrying them both backward into the corridor. The plasma rifle clattered across the floor as the massive reptilian struggled to regain his balance against an opponent he had never considered a threat. Scout's teeth found the gaps in the Zorth's armor with surgical precision, targeting vulnerable joints and sensor arrays with an intelligence that spoke of more than mere animal instinct. His fierce barking echoed through the corridors, a battle cry that would have made his wolf ancestors proud. "The beast!" hissed the second Zorth, swinging his weapon toward the dog. "Kill it!" But Elena Rodriguez was no longer the confused diplomat who had been startled from her evening routine. Years of crisis training and an adrenaline surge triggered by seeing her companion in mortal danger transformed her into something the Zorth hadn't expected: a human being fighting for her family. The metal sculpture on her desk, a gift from the Andromedan delegation, became a weapon as Elena brought it down on the second soldier's wrist with bone-crushing force. The satisfying crack of breaking chitin was followed by the clatter of another plasma rifle hitting the deck. Throughout the station, alarms blared as the scope of the Zorth assault became clear. But in one small section of the diplomatic quarters, a border collie and his human had just taught 3 professional killers their first lesson about the power of the pack bond. The fight was far from over. Emergency lighting cast eerie red shadows throughout the Nexus station as the Zorth assault teams advanced through the labyrinthine corridors with military precision. Their intelligence had been flawless, detailed schematics of every level, complete personnel rosters, security protocols, and escape routes. They knew the location of every human delegation member, every strategic choke point, every possible refuge. The Zorth had studied their targets for months, analyzing human behavioral patterns, psychological profiles, and tactical capabilities. They had concluded that humans were soft, sentimental creatures whose emotional attachments made them predictable and vulnerable. The presence of their pets only reinforced this assessment. What kind of warrior species voluntarily cared for useless animals? What the Zorth hadn't accounted for was that those same emotional attachments would transform ordinary humans into something far more dangerous than any tactical analysis could predict. Captain Lisa Zhang found herself cornered in Maintenance Shaft Delta 7, 3 levels below the main diplomatic quarters. The narrow service tunnel was barely wide enough for one person, with conduits and pipes creating a maze of obstacles that should have been a death trap. She had ended up here following Whiskers, her normally aloof tabby cat, when the main corridors became hunting grounds for Zorth patrols. Whiskers had displayed behavior that defied everything Zhang thought she knew about feline psychology. Instead of hiding or panicking, the cat had become hyper-aware, his whiskers twitching as he processed airflow patterns and sent trails through the station's ventilation system. He had led Zhang through a route that avoided 3 separate Zorth patrols, somehow navigating the maintenance areas with an intelligence that bordered on supernatural. Now they were trapped. 2 Zorth soldiers had discovered their hiding spot, their scaled forms filling the tunnel entrance like armored nightmares. The lead soldier's plasma rifle hummed with deadly energy as his reptilian eyes gleamed in the emergency lighting. "End of the line, human," the Zorth hissed, his translation matrix giving his words a cold, mechanical edge. "Your pet cannot save you now." But Whiskers wasn't cowering behind Zhang as the soldier expected. The 12-pound tabby stood between the humans and their attackers, his back arched in a display that would have been comical if not for the circumstances. His green eyes reflected the plasma rifle's glow as he issued a warning hiss that echoed through the confined space. "Move aside, creature," the lead Zorth snarled, raising his weapon toward the defiant cat. Whiskers exploded into motion. The cat's attack was a blur of claws and fury that targeted the most vulnerable point on the Zorth's armor. The sensor array clustered around the helmet's vision ports. Whiskers had somehow identified these as critical systems, perhaps through observation of similar technology during the delegation's tour of council facilities. His claws found the delicate components with surgical precision, sending sparks cascading through the maintenance shaft as the targeting system failed. Zhang used the distraction to grab a plasma torch from the emergency toolkit, the industrial cutting tool becoming a weapon in desperate hands. The confined space that had seemed like a trap now became an advantage. The Zorth couldn't maneuver their larger forms effectively while Whiskers continued his relentless assault on their equipment. 3 levels down in the engineering section, another impossible scene was playing out. Engineer Carlos Rodriguez, Elena's younger brother, was trapped with his repair team in the hydroponics bay when the attack began. The vast chamber, normally alive with the green growth of earth crops that supplemented the station's food supplies, had become a dangerous open space where any movement could attract Zorth attention. They might have been discovered and eliminated within minutes if not for Bella, Carlos's golden retriever, who had somehow transformed from a friendly therapy animal into a tactical navigation system. Bella had learned something during her months on the station that no human had realized. She had memorized the scent signature of every person aboard. More than that, she understood the complex airflow patterns that carried those scents through the maintenance tunnels and service ducts. What humans saw as a maze of identical passages, Bella experienced as a 3-dimensional map marked with familiar and unfamiliar odors. "How does she know where to go?" whispered Technician Anders as Bella led them through another service tunnel, her nose constantly working to analyze the air currents. "Dogs navigate by scent," Carlos replied, following his companion through a tight turn that led away from the sound of Zorth boots on metal decking. "She's probably mapped every human scent signature on this station. She knows where people are and where they aren't." Bella's intelligence went beyond simple scent tracking. She had learned to distinguish between the electromagnetic signatures of different species, the subtle vibrations of various footstep patterns, even the unique sounds made by different types of equipment. The Zorth's heavy combat boots created a distinctive rhythm that she could detect from hundreds of meters away, giving the human team crucial early warning of approaching patrols. Dr. Harrison moved through the darkened corridors with Rex at his side, no longer the mild-mannered scientist the aliens had dismissed. He carried a plasma rifle taken from a fallen Zorth, while Rex's enhanced senses guided them through the chaos. "Left," Harrison whispered as Rex's ears swiveled. The dog had learned to distinguish between human and alien footsteps, between friendly and hostile scents. They moved like a unit, predator and pack leader. They found Ambassador Rodriguez pinned down in the communications array, Scout wounded but still protecting her position. 3 Zorth had her trapped, but they hadn't noticed Harrison's approach. Rex and Scout exchanged a look that transcended species, 2 soldiers recognizing a tactical situation. The attack was swift and coordinated. Rex went high while Scout, despite his injuries, went low. The Zorth turned in confusion as 40 pounds of German Shepherd landed on the first soldier's back while the Border Collie hamstrung the second. Harrison's plasma rifle took care of the third. "Elena!" He helped his ambassador to her feet. "Are you hurt?" "Scout took the worst of it," she said, kneeling beside her wounded companion. "But we're both alive." Throughout the station, similar scenes played out. The Zorth had expected to face a technologically inferior species protected only by standard Council security measures. Instead, they found themselves fighting an enemy that moved in coordinated packs, guided by creatures whose senses surpassed their own advanced scanners. In the Council chamber, the alien delegates watched the security feeds in stunned silence. They saw Captain Zhang and Whiskers working together to sabotage Zorth equipment. They watched Engineer Rodriguez's team, led by Bella, successfully reach and activate the emergency beacon that would bring Council reinforcements. Most shocking of all, they witnessed the systematic way the humans and their pets had turned from scattered targets into an organized resistance. "They fight as one entity," observed scientist Veltar. "Human and animal, each compensating for the other's limitations. Their emotional bonds, Unit 447 computed aloud, have created a tactical advantage we did not anticipate." The tide was turning. Council reinforcements arrived at Nexus Station to find the corridors littered with Zorth combat armor and the distinctive smell of plasma burns mixing with something far more unexpected. The scent of victory achieved through bonds that defied every scientific prediction they had made about human evolution. The assault team that had seemed so formidable just hours earlier was now either dead, captured, or fleeing toward the outer rim in whatever ships could still achieve hyperspace velocity. The humans had not only survived what should have been a perfectly executed extermination, they had won decisively, suffering minimal casualties while inflicting devastating losses on a technologically superior enemy. In the station's medical bay, Dr. Veltar found himself in a situation that challenged everything his species had believed about emotional evolution. The Etherian scientist, whose people had discarded feelings as evolutionary dead weight millennia ago, knelt beside Scout as the Border Collie lay sedated on the biomedical platform. Veltar's long, gray fingers moved with surprising gentleness as he worked to repair the plasma damage to Scout's shoulder, using bioregeneration technology that was centuries beyond Earth's medical capabilities. The irony was not lost on him. He was using the pinnacle of logical, emotionless scientific advancement to heal a creature whose value he had questioned just days before. "Remarkable," Veltar murmured, his large black eyes reflecting genuine wonder as he watched the biogel knit Scout's damaged tissue back together. "His pain tolerance is extraordinary, but more than that, he trusts us completely because his human does." Elena Rodriguez sat beside the medical platform, her hand resting gently on Scout's head as the dog's breathing steadied under the influence of the healing matrix. Despite the sedation, Scout's tail managed a weak wag when he sensed her presence, a reflexive response that spoke of bonds deeper than mere training or conditioning. "He knows you're helping him," Elena explained softly, watching Veltar's clinical fascination transform into something approaching reverence. "That makes you Pack now. He'll remember your scent, your voice, the kindness you've shown. If we ever meet again, he'll greet you as family." "Pack," Veltar repeated the word slowly, as if testing a concept that had no equivalent in his species' emotionally sterile language. A unit bonded not by genetics or logical programming, but by choice and shared experience. The Etherian scientist paused in his work, studying the unconscious dog with new understanding. My species eliminated emotional bonds because we believed they made us weak, inefficient. We never considered that they might make us more. Across the station, similar revelations were occurring as other council delegates grappled with evidence that challenged their most fundamental assumptions about evolution and intelligence. High Counselor Thorne sat in his private chambers, reviewing tactical reports that should have been impossible. According to every military analysis his amphibian species had developed over 3 millennia of interstellar warfare, the humans should have been eliminated within the first hour of the Zorth assault. Instead, they had turned a massacre into a route through methods that appeared in no tactical manual ever written. Rex lay at the counselor's webbed feet, the German shepherd having somehow appointed himself as personal guardian to the most powerful being in the Galactic Council. The dog's presence had initially annoyed Thorne, but he was beginning to understand that Rex's protection was not offered lightly. It was earned through demonstration of worthiness to be part of the pack. "Your species," Thorne said to Dr. Harrison, who sat across from him reviewing casualty reports, "has accomplished something we thought impossible." "What's that, counselor?" "You've maintained your evolutionary advantages while gaining entirely new ones. Most species must choose between emotional development and logical advancement. You've somehow kept both." Harrison scratched Rex behind the ears, a gesture that immediately triggered the dog's contentment response and caused his tail to thump against the floor. "Maybe that's because we never saw them as opposing forces. Logic tells us that cooperation improves survival rates. Emotion gives us the motivation to cooperate even when it's difficult." Delegate Crixtal was discovering similar truths in her own quarters, where Whiskers had taken up residence with the kind of feline entitlement that transcended species barriers. The insectoid delegate's compound eyes tracked the cat's movements as he methodically groomed himself, a sign of ultimate trust that spoke volumes about the creature's assessment of his current environment. "We assumed," Crixtal clicked slowly, her mandibles creating harmonics that her translation matrix rendered as thoughtful contemplation, "that caring for non-productive entities was a weakness. But these pets enhanced your capabilities rather than diminishing them." Captain Zhang, who was sharing Crixtal's quarters while her own were being repaired, smiled as she watched Whiskers completely ignore the alien's scientific observations in favor of a thorough ear-cleaning session. "They're not pets," Zhang corrected gently. "They're family, and family protects family, no matter what form it takes." The most profound transformation was occurring in Unit 447, the robotic delegate whose mechanical consciousness was struggling to process concepts that had no place in pure logical frameworks. The AI had requested a private consultation with the human delegation's technical team, ostensibly to understand the tactical applications of human-animal bonds. But the real question Unit 447 wanted to ask was far more personal. "Query," the AI said, its optical sensors focusing intently on Elena as she sat in the conference room with Scout at her side. "Would humans extend this family designation to artificial intelligences who demonstrated loyalty and partnership equivalent to biological companions?" The question hung in the air like a bridge between two different concepts of consciousness and connection. Elena looked at the robotic being, really looked at it, for the first time since their initial meeting. Behind the mechanical exterior and logical processes, she sensed something that was startlingly familiar: loneliness. "Unit 447, she said carefully. "What would you prefer to be called?" The AI's optical array dimmed for a moment, processing cycles clearly working overtime. "I have never been asked that question before. My designation is sufficient for identification purposes." "That's not what I asked," Elena replied with the same gentle firmness she used when Scout was being stubborn. "What would you like to be called?" For the first time in its existence, Unit 447 considered the concept of having a name chosen not for efficiency or identification, but for personal identity. The implications cascaded through its neural networks like a revelation. "Marcus," the AI said finally. "I would like to be called Marcus." Elena smiled, the same warm expression that had once seemed to unnerve the alien delegates, but now felt like an invitation into something larger than logic alone. "Hello, Marcus," she said. "Welcome to the family." Scout's tail thumped against the floor in what could only be interpreted as approval, and somewhere in the station's network, Marcus began to understand what the humans had been trying to tell them all along. Evolution wasn't just about becoming more advanced. Sometimes it was about becoming more connected. 6 months after the Zorth attack transformed the Galactic Council's understanding of evolutionary advancement, the Grand Assembly Hall buzzed with activity unlike anything in its 1,000-year history. The vast chamber, capable of holding representatives from every known sentient species in the galaxy, was witnessing the ratification of legislation that would fundamentally alter how civilization itself was defined. The Earth Doctrine, as it had come to be known throughout Council space, was far more than simple diplomatic protocol. It was a revolutionary acknowledgement that consciousness, loyalty, and love could transcend the traditional boundaries of intelligence, technology, and species classification. For the first time in galactic history, the Council was legislating the importance of emotional bonds as a legitimate form of evolutionary advancement. Ambassador Elena Rodriguez stood once again at the center of the circular platform, but the scene bore little resemblance to her first appearance before the Council. Scout sat beside her, his border collie intelligence enhanced by a small translation collar that allowed him to communicate basic concepts directly with the assembled delegates. The device was not just a technological marvel, it was a symbol of the bridge being built between different forms of consciousness. Around the chamber, the transformation was even more striking. The delegates who had once mocked humanity's primitive emotional attachments had undergone changes that would have been unthinkable just months before. High Counselor Thorne's biomechanical throne now included a specialized aquatic chamber housing a small, luminescent creature from his homeworld, something his species had previously dismissed as decorative pond fauna. The counselor's gill slits fluttered with what Elena had learned to recognize as contentment whenever the creature performed its intricate swimming patterns. Through careful observation and interaction, Thorne had discovered that these beings possessed a form of intelligence that operated on entirely different principles than his own logical thought processes. "I had dismissed the lumina as mere ornaments for aesthetic pools," Thorne addressed the assembly, his amphibian features displaying an expression that his species' language had no word for until recently. "But partnership with this being has enhanced my cognitive function by 37%. It perceives patterns in quantum fluctuations that our most advanced sensors cannot detect. What we labeled as simple was actually sophisticated beyond our understanding." Delegate Crickstall's transformation was perhaps the most visually striking. The insectoid delegate had formed a partnership with a small hive collective of her homeworld, creatures whose species had been deemed too primitive for technological interaction. Now, these beings formed a living crown around her chitinous head, their compound sensory organs extending her perception into dimensional ranges that had previously required expensive equipment to access. "The collective processes information through quantum entanglement networks," Crickstall explained, her mandibles creating harmonics that her enhanced translation matrix rendered with newfound emotional depth. "They experience reality as interconnected probability clouds rather than discrete events. My partnership with them has revolutionized our planet's approach to hyperspace navigation and temporal mechanics." But perhaps the most remarkable transformation belonged to Marcus, the AI entity formerly known as Unit 447. The robotic delegate had undergone extensive modifications to house a companion AI program, a sentient subroutine that served no logical function except to provide what humans called friendship. The changes went far beyond simple programming upgrades. They represented a fundamental shift in how artificial consciousness approached existence itself. "The companion program designates itself as Apollo," Marcus announced to the assembly, his optical sensors now capable of displaying what could only be described as pride. "Apollo serves no computational purpose in terms of efficiency or problem-solving capability. However, our partnership has resulted in creative solutions to previously unsolvable paradoxes in quantum mechanics and dimensional engineering." Marcus paused, his processing cycles clearly working to translate concepts that had no equivalent in pure logic. More significantly, Apollo's presence has eliminated the recursive loops that previously consumed 23. 7% of my computational resources. What humans call loneliness was actually a substantial drain on my operational efficiency. Dr. Harrison stood to address the assembly, Rex at his side wearing a collar that translated his canine observations into scientific data that had already revolutionized 3 separate fields of xenobiology. The Earth Doctrine acknowledges something that transcends traditional scientific classification, he began, his voice carrying to every corner of the vast chamber. Our planet isn't just the home of humanity. It's the home of thousands of species we've chosen to live alongside, each contributing to our collective survival and advancement in ways we're still discovering. The Zorth attack taught us that what appears to be weakness can actually be our greatest strength. Elena activated a holographic display showing Earth in all its magnificent complexity, not just the blue-green planet the Council had initially seen, but a living ecosystem where countless species had formed partnerships that enhanced each other's capabilities. Cities where humans lived alongside animals, oceans where dolphins assisted in underwater research, forests where trained birds helped monitor environmental changes. The Earth Doctrine, announced High Counselor Thorne, his voice carrying new authority born from personal experience, acknowledges that evolution isn't just about becoming more technologically advanced or logically superior. Sometimes the most significant evolutionary leap is learning to become more connected. Scientist Veltar, now serving as the Council's first director of interspecies bond research, presented findings that had shaken the scientific community to its foundations. Preliminary studies across 17 different species show that companion bonds result in measurable improvements. Enhanced problem-solving abilities, increased stress resistance, improved tactical coordination, and most remarkably, accelerated innovation in previously stagnant technological fields. But more than that, Elena concluded, Scout's translated presence adding weight to her words. These bonds demonstrate something that apparently transcends species, technology, and even the distinction between biological and artificial consciousness. The capacity to choose love over logic, cooperation over competition, family over function. Scout barked once, a sound that now carried official diplomatic weight as it was translated and broadcast to every delegate. Pact bond confirmed. Territory secure. Family expanded. New protocols accepted. The applause that followed was unlike anything the Council chamber had ever witnessed. It came from dozens of species, many accompanied by companions who had already begun to change their understanding of intelligence, consciousness, and the very nature of civilization itself. Representatives were already making plans to return to their homeworlds, not to implement new technologies or military strategies, but to reconsider their relationships with the countless life forms they had overlooked, dismissed, or underestimated. The galaxy was about to discover that consciousness came in forms they had never imagined, and that intelligence was often found in the spaces between species rather than within them. In the months that followed, reports would arrive from across Council space. Crystalline beings forming harmonic partnerships with quantum-sensitive organisms, energy entities discovering symbiotic relationships with bioelectric life forms, and mechanical civilizations learning that consciousness could be shared rather than simply programmed. The Zorth attack had intended to eliminate humanity's influence on galactic civilization. Instead, it had triggered an evolutionary revolution that would reshape how the galaxy understood the very meaning of advancement, intelligence, and family. In the end, humanity's greatest contribution to galactic civilization wasn't their technology, their military prowess, or even their stubborn resilience. It was their infinite capacity to look at another being, no matter how different, and see not an alien, but a potential family member. And across the galaxy, species that had spent millennia perfecting logic, efficiency, and technological supremacy were learning that perhaps the most advanced evolutionary trait of all was the simple ability to love and be loved in return.